Welcome back to our first content class for technologies of herbal concentration and extraction. They will be talking about generalities of extracting compounds from plants. This is our first class in our first module, which is our overview of herbal extractions. By the end of the module, you should know why humans extract substances from plants and what is an extract and how do we do it. Over the course of this lecture and the next one, we'll encounter several different questions that you shall become aware of. For today's class, I want to concentrate on the overarching question of why do humans spend billions of dollars extracting molecules from plants? And the key concepts that you should learn are where plant extracts are used, why plant extracts are used. Plants make many products, not just a single one. What controls plant growth, and basic concepts of plant growth economics. To start off the day, though, I'd like to ask you to think about what plant extracts have you used today, or if it's the morning, what did you use yesterday? Take 30 seconds, pause the video, write down what you've used today that are based on plant extracts. After you've done that, tally how many did you get? All right. Now that you've done that, let's go through some examples of things that you might have used either today or yesterday. We'll do this by time of day. Let's think about our morning routines. One of the first things that we probably did was wake up and brushed our teeth using toothpaste and then mouthwash. Depending on what your preferences are, those are often flavored with menthol or mint, which is derived from mint. This gives it that nice cooling taste and flavor. Many different types of oils are used to perfume soaps, shampoos, and cleaners. So when you took a shower or bath this morning and washed yourself, did you have just a pure soap or did you have a scented soap? If you had a scented soap, it may have contained things like citrus oils or something more exotic. After our daily hygiene routines, you may have woken up with a little bit of caffeine, which is an extract of coffee and extracted from coffee beans or tea leaves. As you got dressed, you may have put on blue jeans, which are made of indigo, which is a dye from the indigo plant. And if you had a headache because you have a cold or something else, you may have used something like aspirin, which is derived from salicylates originally from willow bark. Many additional products, such as deodorants, perfumes, and other personal care products, often contain essential oils for fragrances. As we go through our day, we may have a water or soft drink that has been flavored with various products. So think of anything that's got a hint of natural fruit flavor, or soft drinks that add even your pumpkin spice latte. Though you may have a cookie, dessert, or baked goods, which often contain things like vanillin, cinnamon compounds, which are coming out of the cinnamon tree. If you like spicy food, you probably ate capsaicinoids, which are the spicy compound capsaicin in peppers. You may have taken some sort of dietary supplement, and depending on where you go, you may have been exposed to air fresheners or fragrances. These are commonly used in stores to give a direct olfactory connection to that store. So think this is done often because the sense of smell is that sense which is tied most to memory. So they want to have these smells that put you in, um, make you think of that store. As you move on through the afternoon, you may use chewing gum or breath mints, once again coming to menthol. Get another boost of caffeine in the forms of coffee, tea, or in a more concentrated form in some sort of energy drink. You may have different cocoa compounds in forms of chocolate and some sort of snack food. Again, sort of citrus oils in terms of flavored beverages, snacks, and cleaning products such as soap, and maybe various different aromatherapeutic products in, say, a yoga studio, sauna, or just because you need it. By the time we get to the end of the day, you may use something like icy hot or muscle rubs, which have combinations of menthol, wintergreen extracts, and capsaicin to give both that cool and that hot feeling. You may relax at the end of the day with a beer, which has compounds which are extracted from hops. You may have botanical extracts in terms of cocktails. If you're outside, you might use something like citronella oil in terms of an insect repellent, or lavender oil for relaxation. Or you may use cannabis as a recreational or medicinal product, again, for those relaxative effects. If you go through certain religious practices, they often use incense in association with meditation or other religious practices, which may be made from plant products. Then at the end of the day, you might have calmed down with chamomile extracts, which come from the chamomile plant, put on some sort of skincare products such as aloe vera or shea butter lotions. And if you have cold, may have used things like eucalyptus or menthol as a way to clear your respiratory tract. Because of this, you can start seeing how natural products impact are used continuously and so frequently through our daily lives that we almost don't see them. But because they're so ingrained, they're worth tens of billions of dollars each year. So this is going to lead us to the question of what is a natural product compound and what is an herbal natural product. This is the definition we're going to use for this class. We're going to say a natural product is any chemical compound produced by a living organism. And an herbal natural product is a natural product derived from members of our plant kingdom. I want you to now think about herbal natural products and think about a series of different products that you use each day and decide whether this is a natural product, an herbal natural product. We have vanilla flavor, ambergris, which is a scent, linseed oil, beer, latex, penicillin, indigo dye, tea, frankincense, Elmer's glue, heroin, and kombucha. Take a second and jot down for each of these whether you think it's an herbal natural product or not. Okay, if you haven't finished reading it down, pause the video before you go on to the next slide, because I'm about to show you the answers. So what counts amongst this list? Well, vanilla flavor is obviously coming from vanilla beans. Linseed oil comes from linseed. Heroin comes from the poppy plant, is the resin of the poppy plant. Indigo dye comes from the indigo plant. Latex is a resinous material that comes from a tree, so that counts. Tea, of course, are leaves which have been steeped in water, and frankincense, so an incense, are these sort of rock-looking like pieces, but this is actually the resin of a um, of the frankincense tree, which is burned to give that smell. What doesn't count are things like beer, right? So while beer may contain some natural products, the main ingredients, ethanol, are made from yeast, which is a fungus, not a plant. Things like Elmer glue are made from animals, not plants, so therefore it doesn't count. Similarly, kombucha and penicillin are made from funguses, not plants, so we're not going to call those herbal natural products. Things like gold is an inorganic material, and petroleum is long decayed plant and animal matter. Ambergris, which is used in perfumes, is comes out of a whale's digestive tract and therefore doesn't count either. Okay, so hopefully this has helped you identify or think about things we encounter every day and distinguishing whether we're going to count that, at least for this class, as an herbal natural product or not. With that, I want to delve into a little bit more about these natural products and herbal natural products. And the key thing that I want to take away is that plants don't make just one compound, right? So they make a variety. And I want to use vanilla as an example. So vanilla, like we just said over on this slide, is an extract of vanilla flavors extracted out of the vanilla bean by soaking it in ethanol. And what comes out isn't just one of the compounds that the vanilla orchid makes. The main component is vanillin, of course. So this is what vanillin looks like. Don't worry, you're not expected to memorize all of these compounds, but I just want to show you this is what it looks like. But in addition to the major component, there's also a wide variety of minor components, such as 4-hydroxybenzoaldehyde, vanillic acid, glucol, eugenol, and anisole alcohol. And what you'll and these I'm just showing are the major, the largest components. And there's about 200 more that you get when you extract vanilla, right? And so what you can see by looking at these chemical compounds and their chemical structure, and we'll talk more about this later, is they tend to have sort of similar features as we go across here. So the plant is making the major compound, and then these other compounds are sort of along for the ride. These compounds have a variety of different flavors and experiences. So if we look at these different compounds, you can see that the human being ingesting these are going to experience those flavors slightly differently. So vanillin is that key vanilla flavor, but these other pieces add to that underlying experience. So the hydroxybenzaldehyde gives an almond, nutty, and cherry flavor. Vanillic acid is more dairy-like and can give a creamy undertone. We can add deep, smoky, and woody characteristics using where we experience a deep, smoky, and woody flavor when we have glue alcohol. Eugenol give us a clove-like warm spiciness, and that anisole alcohol has a softer, sweeter anisette-like flavor. Right, and so because vanilla has so many compounds, if we just have vanillin in our extract, we have a more limited experience ingesting that than if I have all of these. This is why pure vanilla extract or true vanilla extract, which contains all of these compounds plus the other 200, is really expensive and prized compared to imitation vanilla, which only contains vanillin and is made synthetically, and um, uh, it lacks all of these other 200 compounds. Right? It may contain some of these, and you can get higher quality imitations by adding in different amounts of these other pieces, but you're not going to get the full breadth or spectrum of what you get when you have that full set of compounds. Right? So this sort of explains why there's a difference between artificial and pure vanilla extracts, why there's a price difference, and why people still want to experience that pure vanilla. As a quick side note, when you're doing things like cooking, baking, or places where you're going to have a really high temperature, the experience that you'll get from these additional compounds may be muted as they're going to undergo changes during the baking process. But for things where you're going to use the vanilla directly, such as whipped cream or something, where you're not going to expose these compounds to high temperatures, using something like a pure vanilla extract will give you a fuller, deeper flavor. Okay. So this is just one example of looking at vanilla and its extracts and constituents. Current best estimates are that plants produce between 200,000 and 1 million different relatively small molecules, such as shown here. And these give a massive variety of compounds that are going to be experienced and are used by humans or could be used by humans for many different properties. So this brings us to the question of why are the plants making these compounds? I mean, if we think from a very basic biology, what a plant does is it takes in CO2, water, nitrogen, and sunlight, and it converts that into compounds that it can use. So this is things like sugar, proteins, and the compounds that we've sort of been talking about, these scents, pigments, etc. Right. So why, when this transformation takes a lot of machinery, right? So why do plants want to do those, or why do they do that? Why not just put all of their energy into making glucose and proteins? Why make all of these other things? Well, it's because there's a lot of different chemicals that plants use for their survival and success. A lot of this comes from the fact that plants obviously don't move. So they need additional help. A lot of stuff is used in signaling. So this can be for things like attracting pollinators so that they can produce the next generation, or chemical communication from one plant to the other. And then the other major piece is in terms of defense. So this can be defense, prevention of being eaten by insects and animals, protection from microbes. So we get a lot of antifungal, antibacterial compounds, and protection from UV light. So even just like animals, plants can get sunburns. And so they want to be protected from UV light, even though they need light to undergo photosynthesis. Humans often want some of these same properties, right? These properties in attracting pollinators are the compounds that we generally really like using for perfumes, fragrances, and flavors. Defense mechanisms in terms of protection from light, you can think about things like dyes and pigments. This defense from either animals and microbes are utilized in preservatives and insecticides, and then the defense is often exploited in terms of various medicines, right? So plants are not making compounds for us, but they're making compounds which the human body also responds to and which we find value in. And so, in essence, we want to take these compounds that these plants have made and put them to our own uses. Right? And so, just to give a wide variety of some of the molecules and plants, and why we like them, we can think, we've talked a lot about menthol. So, this comes from peppermint. We like it because it has a cooling sensation. Right? We like caffeine, which comes from coffee and tea, because it's a stimulant. We like linalool, which comes from lavender because of its smell. We like salicin, which comes from willow trees because it's anti-pain. We can use other things like THC, dimorphine for their psychoactivities, things like quinine for its anti-malarial properties. This is just a small set of the many, many different uses to which we can put plant and plant-derived compounds. In general, I want to think in this class of sort of 5 different categories of compound usage. First being perfumes and fragrances. So these are collected for their general sense. So think perfumes, soaps, cosmetics, candles, lotions, which is very related to flavoring. So this is things that are added to enhance the taste and aroma of foods and beverages. So think vanilla, cinnamon. We can think about traditional and modern medicine. So think quinine. So this is, once again, the first anti-malarial medicine. Aloe vera, which is still very commonly used for treating sun exposure. Number 4 is psychoactivity. So these are compounds that are going to affect mood, perception, alertness, and consciousness. So think caffeine is a stimulus, and cannabis and cannabinoids from the cannabis plant. And then lastly, I'm going to group everything else into this other usage category. So these are quite still very large industries. Think inks and dyes, insecticides, herbicides, antimicrobials, etc., and other preservatives such as hops. Okay, so these are the sort of the categories that we're going to be thinking of. So where do we actually get these plants? Right? All of these plants that are going to make these compounds that we want don't grow everywhere. These are widely distributed depending on the individual nature of the plant. Let's take a quick example, which we'll go back to vanilla just because I really like it. So if we look at the entire world, we can see that there's roughly 2,500 tons of vanilla beans produced per year. And it's only produced within what's called the vanilla belt, this thin equatorial region of the globe. If you look on the map, you can see these countries highlighted in a lighter shade of tan. These are where vanilla bean orchids grow. And if you also look, you'll notice that 80 to 90% of all the vanilla in the world comes from Madagascar and Madagascar alone. So even though there's other countries in the belt, almost everything comes from Madagascar. Conversely, if we think about hops, these grow in northern climes. And so here's the regions growing. You can see that they're going to be cooler in general, less sun, wetter. And they grow on these sort of big long stalks, and here's the hop flower. And we can also think about experiences and growing of things which are not necessarily one single species. So we're going to go back to frankincense here. So, right, frankincense is the resin of these trees. So when there's a wound, the tree exudes this resinous sap that works to try to heal the plant. And after it's healed and dried, uh, harvesters come along and pry it off to make these nuggets and sell that frankincense. And this is coming not just from a single species, but from 5 major species shown here in this map. So still, again, very concentrated region. But you have different species of plants generating the same or similar uh, compounds that we are grouping together as humans into this resin called frankincense. And so, where the plants are going to grow are going to depend on numerous things. So, in general, we can think about temperature and weather patterns over the course of the year. Do we have a temperature increase, decrease, etc.? How wet things are, so precipitation, the soil quality, exposure to sun, and potentially exposure to other environmental sets. For example, sandalwood requires exposure to a fungus in order to produce the smell that's associated with that with sandalwood. Where plants grow and what they need can be determined through horticultural information. Right? So, just as a quick aside, here's going to be our definition of horticulture. Right? So, this is going to be the science and art of cultivating, developing, producing, and marketing high value plants. Right? So, emphasis on high value plants. This is intensive, requires usually intensive, individualized plant care, and it's usually grown for specialized food extractive sets or ornamental purposes, and it's different from large scale field agriculture, which is sort of agronomy. Right, so there are many sources of information that will give you the horticultural information about different types of herbs and plants. So you can look online and you might see for this type of herb, they'll tell you what weather it likes, what type of light it likes, etc. You can find this online on seed packets or on those little tags that go in the planters when you buy the plants. So just to give a broad overview, just so you're familiar with some of these terms, the first one is that we'll think about is hardiness zone. And so this is our stand-in for both temperature and some weather patterns. So the US is divided up by the US Department of Agriculture into different hardiness zones, shown from the top to the bottom in a series of increasing number, where increasing number indicates the temperature exposures that the plants will experience. And so you can see down here in Arizona where we are, we have temperatures which are very hot. And so you need plants that can withstand that. And this exists not just for the US, but various systems exist around the world. And you can get very detailed hardiness zone maps. Similarly, if you're growing your crops outside, you need to be aware of the precipitation, right? So how much water is coming down on those plants because they need the water to grow. So if you're living in a region with low precipitation, such as Arizona, you may need to water plants or just not grow water-intensive plants. Conversely, if you're in the Amazon where there's massive rainfall, you're just not going to grow something like a frankincense tree, which needs more desert-like climate. Additionally, one of the key things to think about are soil types. So just like there are maps for precipitation and hardiness zone, you can find very detailed information about the soil types throughout countries and around the world. Here's a old map of Arizona, sort of showing the key soil types. And you can go down and go to local horticultural resources, and they'll have much more detailed maps for your area. The key things that you can think about are things like the pH of the soil, how compact it is. So is it really compressed or light and airy? Is it dry? Is it wet? What is it made of? Right? So we'll go back, think about a cactus. The needs of a cactus are very different than the needs of a marshmallow, right? A cactus wants very dry conditions for its root system, and it likes more compact and or sandy soil, so it has something so it can move its roots through, and the roots are not exposed to overlasting moisture. Conversely, if you think of something like a marshmallow plant or reeds, they want really wet soils. They want to be inundated in water. And so we have to pay attention to the soil type in addition to um, the precipitation and temperatures that the plants are experiencing if we want them to flourish. We also have to be cognizant of light. So we mentioned this a little bit before, and it's related to the hardiness zones, but there's also light exposure. And so we can see as we go through different parts of the world, how much light is reached in general in different locations. So we can think of this in terms of a macro scale. So how much light in general is coming down on Phoenix, which is going to look very different than if you were in England. But then also we have to think about things on the micro scale. So this can be in your garden or in a farmer's field. Some plants like full sun, they want to be exposed to 8 hours of direct sun a day. This is going to be perfect for growing things in fields. Some plants like only partial sun or partial shade. So they want only 4 to 6 hours of direct sun a day, right? So these would be plants that you might grow underneath some sort of canopy to protect it, whether that's the side of a house or a fence or blind. And then there's other plants that require full shade. Okay, and so these are plants that do not want exposure to full sunlight. So these would be, maybe think more like certain types of orchids. They don't want to be exposed. They want indirect light. The light is still there, but they're delicate. They don't have as many, say, UV protections compounds as plants that might like full sun. And so you can already start seeing that as because these plants are adapted to use to be exposed to these different pieces, those compounds that they're going to make for UV protection, antimicrobial sets, may be different by what they're exposed to. So not only do we need to think about the macro scale of the environment that it's in, but we need to think about how to space and size the plants, right? So depending on how large the plant is going to grow, you have to place it different distances apart. So here's an example showing lavender. Here's a large row. We have a pathway in between these rows so that the farmer can move about and check on the plants. But these plants, individual plants themselves, can't be packed too densely, right? So there's space between this plant and this plant and this plant and this plant, because the plant itself has a certain size where it does best. And so if we pack them tighter than that, there ends up being competition for light, water, nutrients, and then eventual space. So if we pack too densely, the plants generally have poor yield. If we pack them very low, we have unused space. So we end up generally having some sort of sweet spot where we have the plants are happily sized, and we're maximizing our yield. We're maximizing how much plant we can get from a given acreage. Okay, now that we have a basic idea of plants and why we use them and some considerations that go into how we grow them, I want to just briefly touch upon market value and the costs of these pieces. So if we just think in terms of global trade in legal botanicals, this is roughly a $70 billion a year industry, right? Let alone the trade in illegal botanicals or things like coffee and tea. Just as an example, vanilla beans are roughly a $4 billion a year industry. Sandalwood is about half that, even though much less sandalwood is exchanged in terms of tonnage than vanilla. Same thing, mint is only a $500 million a year industry, even though it is made on much larger scales. If we move beyond, individual products and think about things like herbal supplements, we're now talking about $200 billion a year industry. So in order to meet this massive economic set of contributions, about 3 million hectares are cultivated worldwide. In addition to that, many plants are not that we prize are not cultivatable, right? So once again, I'm going to go back to sandalwood. These need to be we don't have great farming techniques. These are trees which are harvested from the wild. So let's go back and think about what makes different extracts and compounds expensive. And we can generally think about this in 5 different concepts. How much plant is needed? How hard is it to grow? How difficult is the extraction? How stable is the product? And how much do customers want it? I'd like to go through just a few examples to get you thinking about this. So let's start with lavender. So this is something that I think most people are pretty familiar with, right? So lavender has a medium amount of oil in its leaves, right? So when you run your hands through the flowers and the stalks and leaves of lavender, you pull your hand up to your nose and smell. There's a pretty good scent there, right? The amount of oil and compounds there to plant matter ratio is reasonable. So we don't need tons and tons of it. The cost is also, it's not super cheap, but it's also not very expensive. What is expensive for lavender is how we can extract that oil. This requires, or is usually done through a process called steam distillation, which we'll talk about next time, right? And so this is an energy-intensive process. So the extraction cost is relatively high. Because and then we have a medium shelf life and there's pretty high demand. This leaves an overall medium cost. Let's compare that to jasmine. Jasmine is a very powerful scent, but there's a very small amount of the smell molecules per pound of material. So it requires a large amount of plant matter to make an extractable oil or usable product. Additionally, um, because it is very desirable, the actual cost of that plant um, and the picking of it, it's just the flower, is high and labor intensive. Again, this is going to go through an expensive extraction process of steam distillation. This leads to its high overall cost. Now let's go back to our other example of frankincense, which is a resin. Here, the plant mass required is medium. We're not, unlike lavender, we're not cutting down the whole plant, and unlike jasmine, we don't get just one flowering a year, right? In frankincense, we can go out, we can make perforations in the plant, so wound the plant, and then collect multiple times. But there aren't a ton of those plants, and it doesn't grow everywhere, so there's a medium plant cost. But after we've done the wounding, the collection is very easy. We just go through, we make an incision in the plant, and then after it's dry, we break it off, and we're done. Additionally, because it comes off as a resin, it is highly stable, but it's also in high demand. So this gives a medium overall cost. Lastly, I would like to give an example of a low-cost material, orange oil. Here, the plant mass required is quite low. Oranges have quite a high content of oil in their rinds. So you don't need a massive amount in order to extract a reasonable amount of extract. Additionally, the plant costs are very, very low because orange rinds, where the orange oil is, are byproducts of a separate process, making orange juice. So the cost is very low. Additionally, orange oil is made by compression and squeezing of the orange. So it's a low energy intensive process. Even though the stability is low and doesn't last super, super long, the overall cost is low because there's so much of it from the low plant cost and the high yield. All right. With that, I'm going to leave you with a question that I want you to think about based on the analysis we just did. What do you think is more expensive, rose oil or peppermint oil, and why? You'll need this question in the quiz. As a summary for today, I hope that you now are able to answer why humans spend billions of dollars extracting molecules from plants. You have an idea where plant extracts are used and why they're used. You understand that plant growth is restricted by the climate and the plant requirements. And you have an understanding of what drives cost. Next time, we're going to discuss where these molecules are and how we can get them, and different types of molecules. And we'll think about the fact that if plants contain all these molecules, why don't we just use the whole plant? All right, see you next time.